like and leave a heart, please.
There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vdoor Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry. One interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw up at a time. So happy to have all of you here with us on this Friday. Really excited about today's show. This marks a very special occasion because our guest today, Mr. David Ramsden-Wood, is now the most popular guest of the show of all time with his 4th appearance here on the show. And his last appearance was essentially for the same thing that we're going to be talking about today, which is post-election and his thoughts, even though the last election really hadn't been fully figured out. I think it was, we were, kind of 90% of the way there, but there was still some doubt in what was going on. This time, a little bit more of a decisive victory per se for us to be going over and seeing what David's been up to and what's going on in his world and what the future of the industry may hold from his perspective, because that is one perspective that all of us enjoy being able to hear from. So let me know where you guys are watching from. Love to be able to give you guys a shout out here on this show. Absolutely amazing Friday here. So we've got Soren says he's tuning in from Denmark. You know what? I love the fact that this is an international show. Even sometimes when we have kind of like US focused kind of policy kind of talks, it's still great to be able to have people from all over the world tuning in. Philip Reed says, let's go. Yes, sir. That's what I'm talking about. Eric tuning in from sunny south of France, where he hope is not a plan. Yes, sorry, can't read this morning. That's okay. Special today as well. We have a new sponsor for today's show. All right, let me scroll down here. So at any point in time during the show, if you put in hashtag AKM, we will be giving away. There's another special thing for today. We will be giving away, as per standard, normal. Oh. Not this one because it fell off the table and it's got a little bit of a dent there. So we'll turn it around. Right. So obviously one of the 3D printed Gibson Reports drill bits. That way the logo's correct on there. But as well, is it 50? Tracy, is it $50 gift card? She can't hear me. She's got her headphones in. So she'll hear me just a second when the audio comes in back in. So yeah, a $50 gift card to Starbucks. If it's $100, well, then you'll just be surprised. But I think it's $50 gift card from our new sponsors, AKM. So happy to have them here with us. So be sure to be able to put that in during the show today. All right. Who else is tuning in? We've got Mr. Bobby Grimes tuning in from H-Town. Mike Cotton, that is tuning in from Abu Dhabi. All right. Sup D squared. Yes, Aaron, that is true. All right, we got a couple of people putting in the hashtag AKM. Yes, keep doing that. Please do. Zane Foster tuning in from West Texas. Thanks for being here. And then Bobby Grum's putting in a hashtag AKM. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. By the way, if you guys have got questions, be sure to ask them and tag anybody in the comment section who you think would get something from the show today. So please be sure to do that. All right, here's a quick word from our sponsor. And right after this, we'll be back with our guest of the day. like I said, hashtag AKM into the comment section so you can be entered for a chance to be able to win drill bit and as I was just correctly told, $50 gift card. So there we go. All right, put that up there. And without further ado, our guest of the day, Mr. David Ramsden-Wood. David, thank you for joining the show once again.
Good to see you. I didn't realize. I mean, the good news is if I'm here 4 times and that makes me the most popular, then that's like a very low bar. So I'm very excited to be back, and I can't believe it's been, I guess, 4 years since I've been on talking about the election. Almost nothing's happened in the last 4 years, hey?
I mean, obviously it just flew by, nothing happened, and then we're just here again.
Yeah. So where do you want to start? What do you want to chat about?
Well, how about this?
I love by the way, your music, very, very strong. As a former podcast host, when I was picking, I was really, I thought I had a good song. Your song's like over the top legit.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I guess let's get started with probably the disappearance of David Ramsden-Wood on the LinkedIn platform. So maybe we can kind of get started there, because obviously that you had done a lot on that platform prior.
Yeah.
Built up a pretty good following, a lot of great conversations that needed to happen for our industry, and you were the provocateur of many of those. But then obviously some other things kind of taken place. So kind of take us through that, and then kind of what you've been, what essentially what's happened over the last 4 years.
Where did DRW go? I'm coming to you live from the woods of Montana. No, I'm still in Denver. Okay, so yeah, so I know this is going to come as a huge shock to listeners and people who've been alive for the last 4 years. But when I started writing in March of 2020 on LinkedIn that COVID was going to be like the flu, that the vaccine at most would be 65% effective, and that we were all just going to have to go back to our lives, and that we were way over emphasizing it, that it was being done to win the election, that it would probably lead to massive inflation and major changes in the economy. All of that ended up getting me banned on LinkedIn in September of 2020. And so it was an interesting front door seat, right? As you said, I think I had maybe 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. I was writing every day. I had quite accidentally pivoted from talking about energy issues. But if you recall, I think it was about March 7th or 8th of 2020 was when the Russians decided to sort of, the Russians and the Saudis had some OPEC issues, if you recall, and they increased the production limit from 10 million barrels a day to 12 million barrels a day, which drove oil to, from 60 to 30. And then add COVID by April 20th. I was on CNBC Fast Money talking about it, and oil went to negative $37. It was pretty insane. And so talking about the industry seemed relatively irrelevant, because if oil was $30, the industry had nothing left. And so COVID was, to me, the number one issue that was going to drive. I mean, who knew it was going to take as long, but it was going to drive everything. And when social media started to communicate with the White House in August and September of 2020, which is about when Berenson got kicked off and a whole bunch of other people got scrubbed, the censorship truly happened. And so they sent me a letter saying that I violated policy, that there was no appeal, and I was gone from LinkedIn. So it was an interesting time, but that's ultimately what happened. It was a bit of a shift and a bit of a pivot, but that's how I ended up off LinkedIn. And to this day, they have not allowed me back on.
So do you think the FBI had something to do with that? Because all the Twitter papers and stuff, or the Twitter files and stuff that came out that, all of the censorship that was taking place there.
I mean, this is how I've reflected on what was happening in our society, and having got into AI, and hopefully we'll talk about it. But clearly the algorithms are very positive, and a 30,000 person follower on LinkedIn, I don't know what that equivalent on a Twitter or something is, but I was clearly producing content that was getting engaged with. I would occasionally have 500,000 views or 150,000 views of a post. And So did the FBI have anything to do with it? No. But I think generally, like, it's fair to say, and Elon's pointed to this, David Sachs has pointed to this on the All In podcast, but 93% of donations from tech companies historically had gone to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was trying to win an election. And I don't take that lightly. And one of the best ways to do that would be to shut down the economy and really punish Trump. And I think they did that successfully. And so they just looked across their whole platform and were like, we want to gauge everything that is not the narrative as misinformation and disinformation. And my account, along with many, many others, clearly came up in the list and got punted. So for me personally, that was very hard because, I don't usually talk personally stuff on this, but I mean, I lost a lot of friends and I lost a lot of followers and I lost, I think, a lot of respect in the industry for some of my takes. And, I was getting death threats through LinkedIn and through Twitter. I would get,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, you're trying to kill my grandmother and just like things like that. Even my parents, like I didn't talk to my parents or my sister really for the better part of 2 years. It was such a visceral issue. And as you know, as a speaker and as a bit of a character that I've sort of invented this DRW character, he had zero empathy. And so the more people would be frustrated, the harder I would come in the paint. And I think that the net result was losing LinkedIn was a real loss to a community that I had built and a lot of people I really enjoyed interacting with. So that one sent me back quite a bit. And I just never really got back on, and I've never really re-engaged with Twitter. So I still have my Substack, which I publish very occasionally, but it's not the same as it was in the hot take of the day era.
I was about to say, I noticed you still have the Substack, so you're still publishing, you're still writing, and I guess for anybody that does want to keep up with you, that's the best place to be able to do it now, other than here on the Vdoor Locksmith.
Of course, and so anyway, I did that. Then I did a whole bunch of random odd jobs. I was very fortunate when we sold One Energy. I was able to do financially okay. And so I was able to take a pause and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I really didn't want to leave oil and gas, but ultimately just circumstances and then COVID sort of put this gap. So I tried the social media thing. I tried digital sales for a company. I tried buying life insurance policies for a hedge fund. Effectively, so here's something you might not know. 88% of people's life insurance policies get turned back to the company without paying out. And so there is a huge network that will go buy a life insurance policy for someone who's like 5 to 8 years away from death. And instead of them stopping paying premiums, they'll take over the premiums and the policy, and then they get the death benefit. So say it's $1 million policy, you pay 200 grand, you take over the premiums. And as long as you die on time or early, everyone wins. And so it's very dark. It's very lucrative, but there's an incredible amount of fees, and it's a really hard system to break into. So ultimately, it was even too dark for me, which you know something's dark if it's too dark for me. So I went back to law school. So I am now a full-time first-year law student with 250 other people, all of whom are half my age. 98% of whom are progressive liberals who are anti-capitalist and some described as communists. And I'm representing the capitalist middle-aged white guy in law school. So it's been quite an adventure.
So tell me a little bit about that. What was your reaction to, I guess, hearing some of your fellow students, just claim to be a communist? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm laughing at it, but it's just
but I mean, it's true. It is interesting. It's given me insight, I think, into the political system in our country. I mean, you would think that lawyers going to school to try and get big law jobs and trying to honestly pay, the degree will be a $200,000 after tax hit. And so you talk about student debt and like how much behind the eight ball you get, but $200,000 for the next 3 years, plus you're not working, plus you have to live, plus you whatever. So this is a $350,000 after tax decision for people. And I would assume that you would want to pay that back as soon as possible. And in order to pay that back, you would need to be a heavy capitalist. But no, that is not. We have idealism and communism runs rampant. And I think that ultimately pervaded in the Democratic Party. I think it's ultimately why they lost. You know, it was no longer, going back to 2016, if you compare it to today, it was no longer good enough to be 80% on board with Democratic views and policies. You had to be 100%. If you said anything negative about the transgender community, wrong, canceled. If you said that DEI possibly led to a vice presidential candidate who made it impossible for her to win the presidential race. If you recall, in 2020, she was such an unpopular presidential candidate at the time. Her campaign basically ran out of money. She was one of the first to drop out, and Tulsi Gabbard absolutely eviscerated her. She was not a good speaker, and fundamentally, she got the job because she was a Black woman. Now, in law school, if you say this, you are deemed to be like the Antichrist, but it's true. And so anyway, so that's how law school has been going. I stand in for the capitalists, and every once in a while I go a little bit too hard in the paint with some of my views. But I'm trying to move the Overton window for young people in the 30-second glimpse of something I get to say in each class. And I'm doing my best. So I think I need to probably over the next 3 years just take them one a week for coffee, and we'll just have a long conversation around what happens when you get to be a middle-aged person paying taxes, and see if I can help move people away from communism.
Quite the update, and not surprising that we have that viewpoints within some young people. So are you paying for law school with being an Uber driver still? That's the big question.
So I did stop driving for Uber. It was not, so for the gig, for those who didn't know, I did drive for Uber. It is true.
I have as well.
My next book that I was going to write to follow up with what the fuck is wrong with everybody else, what they didn't teach you in business school, was going to be Jobs in America. And I wanted to work at sort of the 10 big companies, McDonald's, Amazon, Walmart, Uber, pick yours, and see if someone with an engineering degree, a double MBA, who helped found a couple of companies and sold one, would be identified in the first 2 or 3 weeks of employment and been like, hey, I don't know that we have you in the right position here. Or if I'm the guy that the boss at Amazon's like, see that 40-foot high stack over there? I'm going to need you to rope up and go get that for me. And so Uber was the first one I did. Ultimately, I discovered that it's virtually impossible to make money. You put a huge amount of wear and tear on your car. And while it was interesting to meet with people, fundamentally, it wasn't a commercial venture. And I think those who've ridden with Uber of late have seen that the prices that they charged initially have substantially changed. And so now really reflect what the taxis used to pay. So like everything, Uber replaced taxis by making a cab from the airport, instead of $50, it was $25. And now Uber from the airport is $50 and cabs don't exist. So we ended up in exactly the same place. Perhaps people would recognize this from the old work from home will be the new normal. And now we're back to working from the office because it turned out we had actually, as a society, optimized things. I think Uber and others are the same thing. And I did not go do the other 9 jobs as a result.
All right. So let's jump into some of the current political change and wherever you see the viewpoints. We want to talk about energy or some of the other policies. What are your thoughts now on, there's been a lot out there on why Trump won, right? Probably one of the most outspoken people has probably been Bernie Sanders, really railing on the Democratic Party. But give me your thoughts, and then, we'll curtail that into what does that mean for energy? Because everybody keeps saying drill, baby, drill. But one of our faithful few, Zach Copeland, says, how about we drill with conservatism and through cash flow?
Yeah. Well, let's start with, if there are podcast listeners, and I'm sure there are who are listening, I'm going to point you to a strange podcast to listen to. It was The Daily from last week. It might be subscriber only, which would be unfortunate. I think that The Daily now has some New York Times related since the company is itself failing and the newsprint business is an atrocious business. They're trying to figure out other ways to make money. But I will say Bernie Sanders was on. And even though I disagree with his viewpoints, he is so articulate and well-spoken and intellectually consistent about his viewpoints that to your point, I think one has to take stock, and the Republicans would do wrong to just discount Bernie Sanders, because, you know, if you recall in 2016, arguably Bernie Sanders would have won the nomination for president. And while he couldn't win, the Democratic Party did what they did with Kamala in 2024, in my opinion, or rather 2020. Bernie should have won in 2020. But then they just sort of like turned the process on its head and picked someone. And so I think that you're going to see a Bernie-like person, and it will be someone like AOC, who is charismatic, well-spoken. Once she refines her bit and becomes more like Bernie, I could see her running in 2028, and I could see having great success. So that would be what I would say about Bernie Sanders. Totally agree. I also want to say, just for the industry, and just for those who are worried about Trump, and I think there were a lot who were worried about Trump. I think the near assassination, to think that if that bullet had been half an inch to the right, the chaos that this country would have gone into, because the Republicans wouldn't have had a candidate. There would have been a lot of people who thought that it was orchestrated by the state. I mean, if you think the JFK assassination attempt that still, you know, captures the imagination 60 years later in an active presidential year where you knock out Trump, that would have been insane. And I think the country would have been torn apart. So thankfully that didn't happen. I also think that the only people that rich people really take advice from are people who are richer than them. And so Donald Trump loves his money, but he has the world's richest man as his counsel/advisor, and who arguably, by buying Twitter, changed the outcome of the election, because he made censorship and misinformation, disinformation campaigns impossible. And so I am extremely hopeful that Elon is going to be involved in some way, shape, or form, regardless of what you think. He's brilliant. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, is fantastic. Chris Wright as the energy secretary, probably the best call, the most honest call you could make for an energy secretary. He understands what energy brings to humanity. He constantly talks about human suffering and the 2 billion people on the planet who use less electricity than a fridge per year. And so I think that that's going to be extremely good for LNG and getting American gas offshore into Europe, where there's a 7x price dislocation. So for natural gas in the country, it's going to be great. For oil in the country, if you look going back to 2019, house prices are up 40%, eggs are up 40%, milk is up 40%, commodities are up 40%, Nvidia is up 3 bazillion%. Everything has seen a massive shift up because of inflation, because the federal government printed $10 trillion. And oil is still the same price at $70 a barrel as it was in 2019. And yet we've drilled 6 years worth of inventory, 5 years worth of inventory. Tier 1 inventory is going away. We've seen the consolidation that I talked about in 2018 and 19 that people thought I was crazy at when I said there'd be 50% less companies and 50% less jobs by 5 years later. And I think we'll continue to see that consolidation. So I think that Zach's point, the industry will never grow production above 15 million barrels a day, in my view, in the country. I think you're going to see flat to declining. The Bakken's going to start declining. The Eagle Ford's going to start declining. The Permian is the last remaining place. And that ultimately Chris Wright and the Trump administration will leverage us towards more natural gas and nuclear, which will be good for natural gas prices and natural gas producers, and the Marcellus in particular. So that would be my energy take on politics. We can talk about that before we pivot to the other thing.
Well, I would love for you to expand a little bit more on Chris Wright. Obviously, he's a Denver native as well. And just expand a little bit on why you think he's such an amazing pick. Because that was one thing that, like, you know, I guess maybe if I'd been reading the tea leaves, I probably could have seen something like that coming. But it came as a complete shock to me to find that one out last week. But I was overly excited because I've seen him present before, and I have never seen anybody present in the way that he does, with such factual based information and just mind-blowing statistics.
So I was surprised too. I gave a speech last week, which is the first time I'd given a speech in 7 months. And I said, I would love to see Chris Wright as energy secretary. I didn't know anything. And what I give Chris Wright the most credit for, I was very vocal on energy issues in 2018-19. I wasn't the CEO of a publicly traded company going on CNBC being slammed for climate stuff. But Darren Woods and Mike Wirth had the ability to take a much more proactive role in advocating for the problems of the climate movement, which we're now seeing, just like COVID. Wind doesn't work, solar doesn't work. We can't change the grid without raising costs, et cetera, et cetera. And the only public CEO in our industry that was out there talking about it was Chris Wright. And the Liberty report that they produced, I think it was 2023, on improving human lives, I think is what it's called. Check it out. But so what it tells me is that someone in the Trump administration is listening and is assigning people who are the correct people over the correct department. Now, we can say at the same time, he had announced Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General. I think that probably was a poor choice.
Well, he's backed out now.
And he backed out, which again, like to the way that this is playing out, I find it interesting because I don't think Trump listened to people in 2016. I think he surrounded himself with like people who would just say yes. And to me, Chris Wright as the Secretary of Energy feels like the right pick. Now, I saw a Twitter thread this morning on the whole Matt Gaetz thing. Regardless of whether you think regardless of the background, it does appear that he did hire prostitutes. It does appear that one of them was underage, perhaps with a fake ID. And it does appear that the Department of Justice investigated and didn't bring charges, and that this thread suggested there were some other things to it. I do wonder if Gaetz was put up for Attorney General so that ultimately he would get the profile, find out who was against Trump, and then be able to have Gaetz appointed by DeSantis as the senator in Florida replacing Marco Rubio. Which, in terms of national attention, and then figure out who your enemies are, Sun Tzu art of war stuff. He now knows the senators who would have declined to back Gaetz, which means that if Gaetz is a senator, he now knows who they are. And then you just run campaigns to drive them out so that when JD Vance runs in 2024, there's less opposition. I mean, it's like Art of War 101. So it'll be interesting to see that. And I really like Senator Rubio as Secretary of State, for what it's worth. I think that he's the right ethnic background. I think he understands how that element of our country, and also, like, even though I wouldn't call it Secretary of State but border issues, I think Rubio is the right one. And he was a former enemy. And to think RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk and Donald Trump were all Democrats 10 years ago. I mean, you could argue 8 years ago, 6 years ago. So it's sort of a reflection that the party has moved so far left that even like old centrist Democrats are now in key roles in this administration. So it's just an interesting sort of turnabout.
So one more thing on this, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk heading up Department of Government of the Doge.
Absolutely the best troll of literally all time. I mean, so Department of Government Efficiency, obviously, the Democrats are looking at and if you remember going back to pre-election, people were saying Donald Trump or Elon Musk should lose his citizenship. He should be investigated for his ties with, I mean, what are we talking about? So will Elon be able to join the administration? Clearly not. How he even runs the companies he does right now, effectively X, the old Twitter, SpaceX, which is apparently going public soon, Tesla, competing with Sam Altman's AI. I think he's very unhappy that that's become a for-profit business rather than nonprofit. Some of the robotic stuff he's doing, like, he's very busy. But I do think that he will use Vivek Ramaswamy as sort of the actual doer, and they're going to expose so much government waste. I don't know that you can cut $2 trillion of spending right now. I think the federal revenue is 4 trillion and our federal spending is roughly 6 trillion. So there's a significant gap. So someone is going to have to bite the bullet and raise Social Security age and attack Medicare. And the truth was, when Social Security was put in 1935, the average life expectancy of an American was 61, and you didn't get it till 65. And there were 33 retired workers for every one, 33 workers for every one retiree. Right now, there's 2.6 workers for every retiree, and you still get it at 66, 67, and you live till 80. So we have to raise the age of Social Security to 78, is the truth. Yeah, I mean, we just do. We have to cut defense spending. We have to cut Ukraine to virtually zero. We have to cut Social Security. Like, none of these are popular. So those are the big buckets. But then there's 5 billion here and 8 billion there and 10 billion here that I do think that DOGE is going to do. Plus the government workers, right? It's been one of the biggest drivers of growth of employment that has kept our employment rate so low, has been government jobs since 2019. Heidi Ganahl ran in Colorado saying that she would cut 10% of the government workforce for every year she was there, thereby reducing Colorado's government back to where it was in 2018. We need to get rid of 40 to 60% of people who work for government. And even just implementing a 5-day work week and pushing people out of DC back to their states to make it lower cost and cutting regulations, we should see the federal workforce fall by 50% in the next 4 years and force those people to be productive and not be just stopping productivity from other people. And then the other thing is we need to break up Google, Meta, arguably Tesla, but the Mag 7. We are now such monopoly state that we are stifling innovation, and we are enabling the censorship of the world based on what these companies can do. So I am hopeful that the Trump administration, especially since he has only one term to do it and he sat on the sidelines for 4 years, I hope he'll listen to people, put the right people in place, and then absolutely dismantle government. And like an appointment like RFK Jr., who I'm a big fan of, and actually his book, the book written about by him about Tony Fauci, the real Tony Fauci, is an incredible read. And if you have questions about RFK, I strongly suggest you read that book. I think he's going to dismantle HHS. And if Jay Bhattacharjee gets the NIH posting, I mean, healthcare in this country is going to be so much better in 4 years, in my opinion.
Maybe they'll start making kids run at PE class again.
Right? I mean, Ozempic, like it's invented. Ozempic was invented in Denmark, and they won't even use it on people. It was invented for Americans because we're too lazy to work out and we eat too much. And we eat too, like, even our food, like the Fruit Loops, if you follow on Twitter, RFK was getting in trouble from the New York Times on a fact check because he said that Fruit Loops in the US uses different materials that make it more toxic and less healthy than other countries. And then the New York Times did a fact check and said, no, that's untrue. And then said that, yeah, they use coloring dyes in Fruit Loops here and they don't in Canada. So they basically proved the whole point. We allow food manufacturers to create a whole bunch of shit for American consumers. And as a result, we're fat. And then Denmark invents an injection to make us thin. Like, it's all about pharma, and RFK, I think, is going to just dismantle our pharma. I would be so short, not investment advice, but if you're an investor in Moderna or Pfizer, you are going to get crushed.
Now's the time to get out, or to be able to sort of at least don't just be holding. But
yeah, Moderna, I think, is down like 90% since the COVID peak. Big shock.
All right. So you mentioned it there briefly. Is it Grok Grok and OpenAI? Obviously, AI is a huge part of day-to-day life now, as opposed to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And everything that's going on with it, but even more so specifically for the oil and gas industry, are the data centers that are going in. Give me your thoughts on AI, data centers, and in any way, if it ties back into some of the energy consumption.
So I think right now in the world, 3.6% of global emissions are from data centers. And so it's not like farm animals, which are 15%. It's not cement, which is 8%. but it's an increasing amount. And the sad thing is, like most of us, I keep getting notifications from my free Gmail, and I emphasize free, that I now have too much storage, which is also free. Saving emails that I haven't looked at since 2017 that I have no need to keep. So as a society, we've been provided all this free storage, and now we're going to start seeing the cost of it. So I think that's number one. And I've noticed on my Gmail account, they now send ads via email. So clearly Google has already started using and more advertising, which like they're just calling it outright ads. And I don't remember seeing it as much as I do now. AI, it is fascinating. I don't know if anyone on here has used ChatGPT. I am going to strongly encourage you to download the app, use it for free. It is the most insane technology ever. I wrote a joke song and put it to music in 90 seconds 2 days ago, just as like a test. And it actually, it was as good as anything on the radio, quite frankly. And it took 90 seconds, and I neither play an instrument nor write a song. I was singing along with my own song that I had just made. And if you want to know, you can email me and I'll tell you what the app is. But again, I did not pay for it. I'm now a music producer, and it was free. So all these companies talk about how AI is going to change their business. We don't have a use case for it. And so, obviously NVIDIA only goes up. Meta only goes up. Microsoft only goes up. Amazon only goes up. But are we meaningfully changing the business models of our life by using AI? I don't know. I will say you can have some really interesting chats with it, and it can give you, like, you can basically do therapy. Tell me why I'm so sad today. Well, how are you feeling? And you can literally have conversations with this chatbot who will literally point you to like resources on how do you lose weight? How do you get happy? How do you do better at law school? It's remarkable. So I don't think there's a use case for it in terms of like what you would pay for. And I will say it can do in 1 second what I can do in 5 hours. So there's an efficiency that is going to change the way the world works. That probably means more people will be unemployed. That's what I see as AI. And I think in the next 4 years, when people are looking to see who to blame the economy, who to blame on the recession, I think we're teed up for a recession. We have debt we need to address. We have AI coming. We have a fake workforce with the government, and we have fake wealth because we printed 40% more money than it ever existed. That's all going to come to roost in the next 4 years. But I do think we come out the other side a much, much more efficient society. And then we'll see what happens.
How prevalent is the AI use in law school?
So technically, you're not allowed to use it for most of your classes. Certainly your writing classes, you're not allowed to use it. But you can, for study tests, I've actually been shocked. You can sort of like type in, write me a hypothetical on property law that identifies random property issues, and it will literally write you a test question. So you can do your practice for your final exams using AI. And then every time you have a question, I can't remember what the rules of adverse possession are. What are the rules? Under different states, but under Colorado, it is this, and this is the time. It answers everything. Does it do as good a job as a lawyer? No, but it's also not $300 an hour. So I truly believe, and that's why I would encourage everyone to go to ChatGPT. Even say, let's say your wife or your husband is mad at you for something. Maybe you're going golfing this weekend and you don't totally have permission. Type in, I should have told my spouse I was going golfing this weekend. I didn't. Please write an apology letter to my spouse that makes them feel like I have the commensurate amount of empathy. And the letter it comes back with, I'm hypothetically.
This is a totally hypothetical situation.
The letter it comes back with is some of the best writing you'll ever see. And that is pretty mind-numbing.
I have to give a shout out to my buddy JP Warren. He did something similar. Instead of just copy pasting it, though, he just took the screenshot off of his phone and sent that to his wife.
I get it totally. So I'm just going to say, write a compliment for Dave Gibson on the best eyeglasses ever. You've truly outdone yourself. These eyeglasses are nothing short of perfection. Their craftsmanship, style, and functionality set a new standard in eyewear. They're not just glasses, they are a masterpiece.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
It's kind
It's
of like
very heartfelt.
just think, I mean, just think about you communicating with anyone now in your life, and whether they're like you can college applications, right? Are you really seeing what the kid can do? If you're writing, if you're a high school student and you're not really that engaged in school, do you leverage ChatGPT and then change some words so that it runs through the algorithm and doesn't sound algorithmic? And then that's your paper. How many people are going to be able to like use this technology to present better? And even at law firms, they're now making you write your writing samples, or some of them are write your writing samples in person on a computer that they provide, because the ability to be better, smarter, faster, no laws, everything, like it's now, if you have a cell phone, you're literally 200% smarter than you were. And that's kind of a crazy issue, right? As those of you out there in the world who are hiring or going for a new job, you're literally competing with people who can use this technology to make them sound smarter.
I've already been told by a friend of mine who was doing an interview, and during the interview, the person was using, he doesn't know which, but some form of audible AI to be able to listen to the question, because it was a remote interview, be able to listen to the question. He'd be like, oh, that's a really good question. Let me think on that for a second. And then you'd see, and then, you know, them looking over at the other screen and then just reciting something back.
Right.
You know, so.
Well, and so I think for if anyone follows me on my Substack, you know this, but so I bought a Tesla last week. Now it was strongly related to, I said something about Elon in class, and it generated a whole bunch of snickers and basically like, I hate that guy, which is amazing that he took all 50% that loved him and thought he was saving the world and somehow made them hate him. And everyone who thought he was like a moron, even though he's never been a moron, everyone on the Republican side was like, I mean, I don't really like this electric car situation, but whatever. Now they're all fans. So after the snickers,
it's completely changed sides.
It's like what's going to happen to the globe when the magnetism of the poles changes. It's like literally just going to go zip, and that's what he did, which is amazing. He's the world's richest man for a reason. But anyway, so after I heard the snickers, I obviously went on to my favorite car dealership, the used car, and I looked for the best Tesla they had in the lot, and I bought the S Plaid. Never driven a Tesla. I'd only ever been in one once, but I figured if Elon's going to save democracy, I'll buy a car. And so I did. It is a 1,050 horsepower car that goes from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 2 seconds. It is like taking off in a rocket ship. The handling is beyond anything I've ever felt. And oh, by the way, the self-driving feature, I very rarely drive myself. I literally just say what the destination is. I press the button and it drives me there all by itself. And the only rule is I have to keep my eyes on the road, which as soon as Trump softens the self-driving regulations in his first 90 days, I could read a book, I could read a text, I could study, I could write a letter using AI, obviously, while I'm driving. And this self-driving thing, it changes. It is the craziest technology I've ever seen. And I have to say the car is the most fun car I've ever driven. So, I mean, that's technology. That's where we're at.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty bold. I mean, there's a lot of little nuggets there. I mean,
oh yeah,
you know, just for
I'm still just as oppositional as I was before. And I have been a big fan of Elon. I don't like Tesla, the valuation. I don't want to be mandated to buy an electric car. And to be absolutely clear, this is a second car. Teslas, in my opinion, are not a date. I mean, maybe the Model 3, but like I'm now life on batteries. You know how you're like constantly walking around checking your cell phone, being like, oh, I only have 15% if I don't get to a charger soon. And then you're like parking yourself at the airport to get like 3%. I mean, that's my experience with the car. I'm constantly trying to find a plug-in. The battery drains overnight. I get 7% charge from a normal charger in an hour and a half. So like I'm constantly like finding a battery since I don't have it installed in my house yet. And it's a strange experience, but yeah, it's an amazing second car.
Well, I want to shift gears with you a little bit. Over the last 4 years, we've also had massive, especially in the last year and a half, massive consolidation with acquisitions and mergers within oil and gas. Give me your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, predictable. I think you can go back to 2018 when I said this was happening. There's no reason in an industry that's as mature as ours and once the capital went away, right? Like it was all well and good in 2014 or honestly 2006 to be like, we have all this new acreage, we're going to drill all these wells, we can drill 12 wells per spacing unit in the Bakken. You know, the industry clearly overcapitalized and overdrilled, and you know, we trade at 3 or 4 times cash flow. Nvidia trades at 30 times revenue. So, you know, 30 times revenue. There is no valuation case that justifies Nvidia's valuation, but no one cares. A classmate of mine made a whole bunch of money on Peanut the Squirrel crypto. He spent like $1,400 and sold it at 40,000 the next day. I mean, like, and kids that I go to school with who are half my age generally feel the economy has failed them and that they have no opportunity to ever buy a house unless they hit it on one of these crypto meme stock situations. So the world has moved away from this sort of real business model to this, everyone is just gambling and maybe you'll be one of 15 who it hits and then you'll make money and then you can retire and congratulations. And then you'll give it all away because you're a communist. But to the point of oil and gas, like we need less people, we need less wells. All the tier 1 inventory in the country, most of it has kind of been depleted. The industry's done a really nice job finding secondary zones in the Permian and some of the other basins. But if you just look at the 914 report and some of the stuff coming out of the EIA, we're rolling over. And so in a declining world, how do you have more companies that are poorly valued? You don't. And so I would continue to expect to see the marathons getting sold to the Conocos. We have not seen EOG participate. Devon needs more. And you're going to see all of the companies on that RBC Richardson Bar website shrink, consolidate, and you're just going to see less and less and less and less. As part of that, we need to see the Exxons, the Oxys, the Conocos, the Chevrons, the EOGs go international, because we do need more oil. We need more oil from rule of law countries, and places like Venezuela are massively undercapitalized. And so we need a government like Trump who understands this to go into Venezuela and do what we've done for regime change everywhere else, and actually just like help rebuild Venezuela to make it an oil producing nation and solve some of the structural issues that are having Venezuelans illegally enter the country and then at times commit crimes because they're desperate. There's no path. So this deportation has to come with improving the conditions of the countries they came from. And one way to do that is to help countries leverage their natural resources. Venezuela is the one that comes to mind, but Iran, the Middle East, any of the places we're seeing mass exodus of people, we need to invest. Instead of spending on a $150 billion terminable war in Ukraine and Russia, where Russia continues to threaten the use of nuclear weapons. And quite frankly, if you have them, you're going to have to use them. They're not a deterrent if you don't use them. So like they're writing it on the wall, but the US needs to exit that, redeploy the capital into other countries to make the standard of living there much better and produce resources that we need to be able to import and support our AI revolution. Of course, I'm not in the administration, but I have faith that those who are also see the same issue that I see.
What do you think about on the oil field service side? So we've, the operators, most of them are working through cash flow now, paying back good dividends. What do you think about the oilfield service side?
I think that generally I would be structuring my business towards the most profitable parts of my business, and those parts of my business that have started in decline, I would expect them to continue. And so, I think about the newspaper industry. Like, the newspaper industry has been dying for 30 years. Just people continue to be like, "Oh, maybe it'll come back. I'll buy a newspaper." No. And so there are certain areas in the oil field service that you would have your highest gross margin, that people are most interested about. It's going to be based on efficiency, speed, cost savings, and safety. And then there's going to be other stuff that is just like, has been an ancillary service that in a normal world people sell. But I would be exiting those businesses, consolidating, and trying to maximize the amount of money I could withdraw, and then ultimately be merging just like the big companies, so that you have a bigger balance sheet to be able to service the big companies that are left. Which again, there's been a theme for 5 years. I haven't changed it. I think we're just starting to continue to see it. And I'd ask everyone who's listening, reflect on the last 5 years and whether it's generally better or worse, what's got worse, what's got better, and then use that information to type in your AI chat GPT and get a recommendation on strategy.
Okay, so you mentioned you're not in the administration. If you were, what would be your strategy to the Trump administration, and what part, if there was a part, where would you want to work at?
So I would work in the Trump administration. I would work anywhere. Anywhere I thought I could be helpful. I do really think immigration is a huge issue. Like, it was immigration and the economy beat out abortion and DEI. I mean, that is the mandate that everyone voted for. And so, do I think that Trump's going to deport 15 million people? No. But do I know that when my wife at the time and the kids came to the US, we had to have an 18-month process for them to get in legally and for them to have a path to a green card. And I was working and I was an American citizen. And so this concept that you can just show up, declare asylum, and then go in the system and get hotel rooms in New York, regardless if that's a political talking point, it is happening to a degree. So the number one thing we need to address is immigration. I really believe that. I think number two is we would need to address Social Security, Medicare, and the deficit to try and balance the budget. And then number three, from an energy perspective, we have so much natural gas here. We need to be able to export it to help Europe ultimately and help increase profitability of American companies, but also balance power in Europe so that they're less reliant on Russia, which is what this core struggle is about. And we need to push forward nuclear technology that will allow us to continue to have a growing energy grid that is more stable than wind and solar can provide. So those would be the areas that I would focus on. Obviously, that's what everyone's focused on. And I'd just like to go to dinner with Elon and Vivek. I think that would be a really, really fascinating dinner for me.
What would be the first thing that you would ask either one of them?
Man, I would ask Elon how it felt to push in basically 100% of what he made on his first. Back in 1995 or 6, he discovered that the Yellow Pages was not useful from a mapping standpoint, and he discovered that there were now maps. So he turned the Yellow Pages into a searchable map. So what we have now is Google Maps was basically his baby, and he made $17 million. His brother made 11 when they sold that in Canada. He then took $1 million and bought a McLaren, $3 million and put it in the bank, and pushed $14 million into what would become PayPal. He then sold PayPal and put all of it into buying rockets from Russia to start SpaceX. And the level of cojones to push life-affirming and life-changing money on the table is crazy. And that's why he's worth $250 billion today. So I would just say, at what point did he ever regret pushing all that money in? And then with Vivek, who did very well on his own and obviously wants to be in politics, I'd ask, is he ever afraid that he made the wrong decision? I mean, he's not going to be a billionaire because he didn't stay in industry long enough. So it'd be interesting to hear their advice. And like I said, rich people, not that I'm rich, but rich people listen to richer people. And both of those people are substantially richer than me. So I would definitely listen, and hopefully Trump is listening to both of them.
Yeah, I think both of them are up there on the food chain of that. Okay, a question that has just come in. Aaron Baxter says, "What's your 2 bits on the future of geothermal energy?"
I think geothermal has a place, and we're going to have to invest in energy across all sources, including coal, all these. If we move away from this panic, and my law professors, I love them, but they're all panicked that climate change is like the number one thing, and that the evidence shows that all these things are happening. And I continue to say there's 150 million people on planet Earth that currently live below sea level. Currently live, not going to live. Currently live. Amsterdam is 6 feet below sea level. It's been kind of a vibrant city for the last 1,000 years. I think it's probably going to be okay. We can adapt. So geothermal will have a place, but it will be very minor. Just like wind has a place, but it will be minor. Solar has a place, it will be minor. Natural gas and nuclear energy and efficiency are the future. So if you're in a place where you think you can, leverage geothermal, or new housing developments can use the geothermal to help optimize efficiency and help moderately change things at a cost, great. But like, what's the payout of geothermal? Is it going to create the next $1 trillion industry? In my humble opinion, I don't believe that it is.
Okay. Well, there's the take on that. All right. So we're almost coming up here on an hour. What question have we not asked you that you would like to be able to talk about?
I think we've covered everything. The piece that I would just share, and then I do have to go because I have to get to my final exam review and property in 30 minutes. Which it's just it is.
You're doing a podcast before having a final exam.
What are we gonna do? It's part of it. I would say, and I would say this to everybody: the world changes, and it changes dramatically. But I think all of the trends are predictable. And what I did, I think, well over the course of my career, and also what I've done well in the last 5 years with predicting energy trends and COVID trends and economy trends, and it's all there. You just have to look at the data and accept it. So as I've always said, hope is not a plan. And so as you're looking at your career and you're looking at your business, be very realistic about where it is, where it's going, and what the changes are. And it would be advantageous to get into places that are growing. And I think that you can see that in the last, when the horizontal well revolution was occurring from 2006 to 2015, a lot of people made money. Then oil fell, and then it came back, and then a lot of people made money, but not the same numbers of people. And now we have this other phase where less people will make it. But then you go to Silicon Valley and you look at some of these AI technologies and some of these cutting edge. I think the medical system is ripe for massive, massive, massive disruption. I think health, if we move away from just getting an injection and getting a pill, and we're going to make your dick better, and we're going to make your weight better, and we're going to make everything better. Pill, 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 pill. Well, how about workout, lose weight, stop drinking? There's other ways to do it. And I think that the health revolution in the next 4 years is going to be there. I think using the technology that oil and gas has around data management and bringing that into a healthcare environment, I think is going to be huge, because we have horrible healthcare in the country. It's super expensive, doesn't work, it's not accessible. But yeah, that would be my advice to people. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to share your opinion. At the end of the day, like me or hate me, you know exactly where I stand on things. And if I'm wrong, text me, email me, call me, and let's have a debate. And I can change my mind. And I think that those are the types of people we need in politics. And I really hope that Trump has learned in the last 4 years that he needs to surround himself with thinkers, not doers. And so for the first time in a long time, I'm really optimistic about the next 4 years. And so I am taking my son for his 20th birthday to inauguration, because I bought a car for Elon. I'm flying to Washington for Trump. I am going to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that would be what I would leave people with.
Well, awesome. David, thank you so much for coming on and being with us. Obviously, another great conversation. Hopefully, let's do this again. Let's not wait another 4 years to be able to do it. Thanks for everybody out there watching. One last thing, you guys, hashtag AKM. Let's do a quick little giveaway here at the stage. They are our sponsor for today. Let me click over here. All right, let's draw this, see who our winner of the day is. And it is Bobby Grimes. Bobby, thanks for watching, sir. Do appreciate it. All right, David.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Be safe, be good, and have a great day.
And everybody that's watching, we won't be here next week, so have a wonderful Thanksgiving. The week after that, oh, David's gone. We'll have Michael Pahonik on, and then Abraham Montez after that. Thanks for everybody watching. Clear takeaway, David. World needs more DRW. Yes, I completely agree. All right. He had to run to go do his final. No worries. Thanks everybody for being here. Really do appreciate it. Absolute amazing show today. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much. And as always, know your industry.